Welcome to the conversation.
So we'll start with the three questions over the last three issues, as quickly or as briefly as you want. The first question was, what is the most important idea in education?
Well, there's so many different ideas that have been coming to a head, I'd say, in the past couple of years. And in a way, we've been a little bit blinded by our focus on making sure that students achieve progress in the way that we understand progress, i.e. numbers. And I think the sea change has come about quite recently in a way that has removed the value of the number in learning, which is really interesting.
What do you think has brought about that change?
I think there's a multitude of different things. I think the way that education has been talked about globally, and the OECD Global Competencies document has helped. But the conversations around high performance learning, the conversations around whole education, the network, the future learning, has all sort of it's all talking about the value of learning at a deep level and a deep understanding level, and a multi and interdisciplinary level, as opposed to a singular judgment of a student's understanding based on a particular moment in time and a particular recall of that moment in time. So I think we've moved on from that as a profession, or I hope we have. So we're now in a position where we're looking at ways in which we can enhance that learning and enhance the opportunities for that learning, whether it's the interconnectedness or whether it's the acknowledgement of the plasticity of the brain, or whether it's the teaching of very specific metacognitive skills, so that student recall is enhanced, and also so that we can make schools a better, happier place for students, so that we can compensate for the increase in mental health issues in students. Because I think actually what's happened as a knock-on effect of our concentrating on the number and concentrating on the individual and the recall of knowledge and the judgment in a very summative way, that's caused a lot of stress in the profession, and it's caused a lot of stress with students, and it's also caused a lot of stress with staff. Because there's been such a top-down accountability structure from government through Ofsted to leadership teams into the classrooms, onto the students, and there's also there's a flow chart of pressure that you could quite easily construct to demonstrate where that pressure's come from and where it's gone to. But ultimately, it's had an effect on students' mental health, and now we're in a position where we have to rewind and think, how can we do something about that?
So the second question was, what is the purpose of education?
There's a number of different theories around what the purpose of education is. There's the theory where you're preparing students for the workforce. You're preparing students to fulfil the needs of the economy. You're preparing a student to operate in society in a way in which you want them to operate. I think in today's society, though, there's a moral imperative there as well that talks some way towards saving the world, and the purpose of education is to make sure that the students understand the impact that they're having on the environment and on the world and on each other. And to develop an understanding of the relationship that they have between each other in society and the world as a whole, so that we can make the world a better place, so that we can make each other better people, and so that we can all live happily ever after.
Is that why you got into teaching in the first place?
In the first place, I got into teaching. I actually got into teaching as a result of reading All Our Futures by Ken Robinson, and at the same time, when I started training, I was having conversations with Anthony Gormley about the purpose of creativity and art in education, and the value of artists in residence, because I was previously an artist in residence. So I got into teaching with a creativity badge, if you like. But as soon as I got into teaching, I started to understand the inequalities that existed in society, and started to develop an ethic or a value in myself that wanted to compensate for that and wanted to help that. Because growing up, I wasn't from a wealthy family. I wasn't from a wealthy background, and I sort of fell into university and did really well, and fell into the profession and did really well. And it's as a result of the opportunities that I fell into. And I think that we can do a lot by providing those opportunities rather than just opening them up for students to fall into.
Now, obviously, now as a principal of an academy, how much do you believe it's true that we can change the world through schools, through this school?
I think the way that you structure the curriculum can have a major impact on the students' perception of themselves. And I think that the way that you talk to students and the culture that you have in a school can change the way that students think about themselves, talk to themselves, and talk about themselves. And that ability to talk themselves up in their head means that they become more aspirational. And so I think we're developing a movement, really, at Mounts Bay, where we have more students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that are aspiring to greater things. We've got sons and daughters of firemen who are aspiring to go to Eton. We've got single parent families who have got children who are at Oxford and Cambridge, and we're seeing this on a year-on-year basis increasing. So I do think that those students that are going out there and doing those things and getting those degrees and developing that knowledge, they are changing their place in society. And I think that's what the movement's about. It's changing the way that society is structured to make it more equal. And if you can make society more equal, then more people will feel like they can change the world for the better. Which is what it's what's happening at the moment with the children that are striking. It's a little bit tragic that they're striking to stop their education to save the world, whereas actually we need to be changing education so that we can enable them to save the world.
So one of the ways schools do that, obviously, is through designing a curriculum that allows them to transform themselves from wherever they've come from into these aspirational people that are making wonderful performances. So what should the curriculum be?
Well, it's a sort of movable feast at the moment, I would say. I think we're in the very early days of designing a curriculum which allows this levelling of the playing field. There are some things that we know about that are they're truths that we need to be looking at and we need to be working with. But because schools are for years we've been locked into the hierarchy of subjects where English, Maths and Science are at the top of the hierarchy, and every other subject is being squeezed across the country if it's not an EBAC subject or not, it doesn't fit into a particular bucket. If it doesn't fit into a particular bucket alongside other things that fit into that bucket. Things that have come, that have come to into my small brain recently are, the way that the brain grows when you study a language, the way that the brain, physically grows when you're learning a musical instrument or music appreciation. And if we can start to harness that and understand that plasticity of the brain is one aspect, but growing the brain is another aspect. If you can marry those two together, you've got something that's quite powerful. And if the curriculum is allowing all students to develop their brains in that way, then you've got a very good a set of conditions to build from.
Is there not a case that, aside from that, the neuroscience that says the brain physically changes when you learn music or a language, surely there's an argument though that knowing another language and being able to play an instrument or appreciate music at a deep level, and even to appreciate art and paint or whatever medium you're working in, that surely deepens your experience as a human being, whatever it's doing to the brain. So surely there's an argument outside of just neuroscience.
Yeah, of course. And actually, society has grown and developed because of the understanding of the arts in particular, but also science. There's an argument that was in my head this morning, which was around, as I was eating my breakfast, which was around the fact that science is responsible for all the bad things in the world, as well as all the good things in the world, because the plastics, the pollution, the massive developments that we've got in society and nuclear energy and things like that are hugely damaging to the world. But also at the same time, we've got the sciences that are developing solutions to those. And somewhere along the way, there's an ethical, values-driven, religious approach, which we haven't really got to grips with in education recently, I would say. So I think we need to do some thinking around that.
It strikes me that one thing schools could do is think a little bit more about the sort of society that we want to create in the future, and decide on the sort of curriculum that will make the sort of people we want this country to be like in the future. Do you know what I mean? So what is it? I know we do citizenship and so on, but it seems to me...
Isn't that... do we not want everybody to uphold the decent British values? Isn't that what we do?
Well, are they clearly defined?
I think they're very clearly defined.
Go on in.
I'm being extremely facetious.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, but, there must be out there a conversation in education about what it is. And the reason I'm saying this is because one of the things that I think Dylan Williams says, there's 4 different modes of curriculum. One of them obviously being preparation for work. One of them being preparation for, being a citizen. But one of them was about sort of knowledge transmission. And it strikes me that we need a conversation not only about a knowledge versus skills curriculum and, not or
the full stack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But also when we talk about which knowledge do we actually want the kids to know, but it strikes me that we need a really good conversation about which bits of knowledge to pass down to the next generation. And, for example, obviously Shakespeare's been passed down over the last few hundred years, but how many writers haven't been passed down? That's a conscious choice by educational establishments to transmit that knowledge. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So there are certain things we choose to transmit to the future, I guess.
Well, there's a certain perspective that we've always selected to transfer to students, which is the curriculum, isn't it? So the syllabus and the curriculum. So we've got a particular Western view of history, for instance. I talk specifically about the history of art. If you were to study the history of art in the 1980s, there were very few women artists in the world before the 1960s. But actually, there were loads.
Yeah.
But the perspective of a male-dominated examination system and a male-dominated hierarchy that has, in a way, planted the knowledge that we want to keep hold of to perpetuate the inequalities that are already inherent in society.
Yeah. So therefore, it's beholden to us redesigning a new curriculum to have a serious conversation about which knowledge. In literature, they call it the canon. What books should be in the canon.
Yeah.
And I had a talk by Noam Chomsky recently. He talked about the fact that the canon, up to recently, was entirely dead white males.
Yes.
Your Shakespeare's and your Keats and your Yeats and all those sort of people. But actually, there's no black voices in there. There's no women voices in there. There's no, from this country, there's no Commonwealth voices in there.
It's the same with the arts, and it's the same with the sciences. And it's the same with the historians, and we also have a habit of shielding society from the atrocities that happen.
Yeah.
whichever country you're in. And I think with the growth of the World Wide Web, it's much more difficult to shield. So in a way, that knowledge has been much more democratic and accessible to everybody. So in a way, the curriculum should provide opportunities for students to develop their connoisseurship of knowledge, and their ability to identify which knowledge is truth and which knowledge is not truth.
Yeah, I mean the democratization of information, I would say, on the internet is vast, but I wouldn't say it's all knowledge, because as we know,
some of it's misknowledge.
Exactly, some of it's complete rubbish, isn't it? So that leads me on to skills then, because I think one of the skills we must teach kids is the ability to think critically and to examine information that they read or receive, to determine what's fake news and what isn't, and make their own judgments based on critical thought, analysis, evaluation. So what other skills in a knowledge/skills curriculum do you think we need?
Well, there's a lot of work that's been done on this across the years, and one of the major skills that is just goes without saying is creativity and flexibility, which is it comes into even developing critical thinking. Creativity and flexibility comes into that, and I think that we've been guilty in education of squeezing that out over the past number of years, squeezing creativity out of the curriculum. I mean, I'm saying that is generally, not necessarily at Mounts Bay, because we've increased our creative approach, we've increased the creative subjects, we've increased our creativity within the sciences, we've increased our creativity across the whole board in mathematics. But I think in a lot of schools, they've squeezed the creative curriculum and they've squeezed a lot of creativity out of the profession, which has become dangerous. And that's one of the reasons why I think we've got a series of disenfranchised teachers, because they haven't been allowed to develop their own creativity. They've been told what to do, and they've been inspected on that thing that they've been told to do, as opposed to being valued as professionals who have had a lot of training to do the job that they do.
Yeah, so obviously I was just telling you about elsewhere in the issue, I'm reprinting a speech by the MP, and so what's your take on whether we should, if we had carte blanche, should we do away with examinations at 16 and create something completely different and more through school?
We've got these arbitrary points in time where we make judgments about children's lives, and the very strange place that we're in at the moment is that there is an increase on judgments that are being made in the early years, prior to students then joining the rest of their lives. And those judgments that have been made in at age 4 and 5 are then dictating the flight paths that we expect students to go on for the rest of their lives. Now, we all know that students develop at different stages and different rates in different months, let alone different year groups. And so there's an argument to say that we should ditch all examinations, because what are they worth? They're just a judgment in time. But actually, society needs some sort of measure for some areas of life. Now, the gap between primary school and secondary school is an arbitrary gap, because it's still you still have to go to school, and now the gap between 16 and 18, post 16, as in the GCSEs, is also arbitrary, because you've still got to go to school. The only judgment that can be made from a GCSE is whether or not you're able to go on and do A-levels. And again, that's not always a correct judgment, because of the multiple things that impact on a student's performance in a GCSE exam. So the argument I completely understand the argument to remove GCSEs, and I completely understand the argument to remove Key Stage 2 SATs, because that's in the same, in the same canon, if you like. But I don't think society is ready for that yet. And I don't think universities are ready for that yet.
Yeah, I mean, you need a robust way of measuring preparedness for particular courses at university. Once you specify a degree course, you need to be able to show you're ready for that. But it strikes me that needn't be having done 2 years previously, 8, 10 GCSEs.
No, and interestingly, the world of
and then only 3. It always struck me as very reductive to go from, I did 10 GCSEs many years ago and then down to three obviously sciencey, but three A levels. That was it. Yeah. And I enjoyed many courses. It was a real difficult decision. Yeah. I dropped things that I would have loved to study further.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? I would keep it broader for as long as possible.
Well, the other thing to think about is, if the curriculum should be a broad curriculum because it's preparing you for life, then knowledge is only one aspect of that. And if you choose not to go to university, because at the end of the day, all the exams are really doing is preparing you to get to university, then when you go into the world of work, there's so much information out there about what people like in the big businesses like Google, Amazon, and Apple. They don't even look at GCSEs and A levels and degrees anymore. There are aptitude tests, there are skills tests, there are relationship tests, there are that they do, which are just as you were saying, they're things that will make you operate successfully in that area.
Yeah, but they might become the examinations of the future.
Well,
yeah. That'd be interesting. Right, okay, we'll wrap it up with this. What advice would you give to younger staff joining the profession in terms of I heard it described recently that the pendulum is swinging back away from the sort of Govian focus on data and measures and all that towards a bit more
autonomy.
Yeah, for school. So
I think I would agree with that statement. I think the autonomy is moving back into schools. The ability for us as a profession to be creative about the way in which we prepare students in our localities for the world or for the next phase of their life is really refreshing and exciting. And I think that's something which makes teaching a much better prospect. It makes teachers feel a lot more comfortable in their own skins, really, because we've spent an awful lot of time developing the skills in our armory of being a teacher, only to then be told over the past few years that a lot of those skills aren't necessary. They're not useful because this is what you have to teach and this is how you have to teach it. So in a way, it's removing the reins from the teaching profession so that they can flourish and they can be better teachers, and that will make the teaching profession a lot happier place to operate in. Best job in the world.